Hello, this is Gary. Happy to share with you my thoughts on the assignment this week. How I spent this summer vacation. Well, it wasn't really a vacation. I spent it like all of you spent it. We were doing classes. We were preparing for what we're doing now. So that was keeping me very busy. I was also teaching classes. I was teaching two classes at Lake Washington Institute of Technology. I was teaching an HTML with CSS class and a Java 3 class, or sorry, a Java 2 class. That was my first time teaching both of those classes. So it was interesting. I'm teaching the HTML class again now this for fall quarter. It's a little bit easier the second time you teach something, of course. I also went to Texas for a little while. I went there for a week to attend a training session for computer science educators, specifically professors. It was interesting. I think probably it was the wrong time for me to go because I was so busy with all the work that I was doing, but it was still interesting. I got sick while I was there, which was not so good. So it kind of put me a bit behind when I got back because I was sick for about a week after that. Regarding the assignment this week, in particular, the picture of these cheerleaders and that lovely young woman who's taking a knee. Certainly, that's been in the news. We've seen it, NFL, we've seen it, schools. And it's a real question as to whether or not it's disrespectful during a Pledge of Allegiance to take a knee instead of putting your hand over your heart. Probably a student could simply stand and do nothing, and no one would say anything or even notice who's got their hand, who's saying the pledge, who isn't. But by getting on her knee, she's definitely making a statement there. So the question is this considered to be unpatriotic and should this not be allowed in school? Should she be required and should the principal, and if I was the principal, would I be required to make sure that this woman suffers some sort of consequence? It's interesting that this even comes up. This is a public school, I believe. If it's a private school, then the private schools can actually set their own rules. But because it's a public school, the woman does have the right to free speech. She's required to be in school, and she has a right to attend a public school, and she has a right to free speech. She doesn't lose that right. She doesn't waive that right simply because she attends school. So if I, as the principal, were to discipline her, the school, as well as myself, would have legal liability. I guarantee you there would be a lawsuit. And if the school board wishes to fire me, or if the parents decide they want to vote out the school board and hire somebody else, it's not going to work. They're going to lose in court. It's going to be kicked out, and you're going to spend an awful lot of money of school district money that we really can't afford to spend paying lawyers to fight for something that I already know is not a winning case because it is a First Amendment right. It's a little bit different if you're in the NFL because the NFL is not a public institution. It is a private for-profit corporation. And just like if I'm working, in my job, working in the software industry, or if I'm working at McDonald's or wherever I'm working, I don't have the right to make political statements. There is some limitation on free speech that I accept when I work for a company. The NFL players are employees, so they don't quite have the same freedom that this young woman has. So it's not quite the same situation. Now, whether or not you think it should be allowed or not, I'm not going to get into that as far as the NFL is concerned. But as far as public school is concerned, we don't have a choice. There's no choice here. So it's a false choice to think that you do. But this reminds me of a big controversy that happened back in the 90s, um, which was whether or not burning a flag should be considered free speech. If that was so unpatriotic that we should have these horrible draconian measures to put people in jail or fines or something if they're doing this. And a lot of people thought we should. Was something of a dog whistle for the conservative side, and I'm conservative myself. a bit of a moderate conservative. But anyway, but the Supreme Court ruled that it is free speech. It may be a really crass and stupid thing to do, but it is considered free speech. And you do have a right to do it. And a lot of people think, well, that just makes no sense at all. We shouldn't allow this sort of thing. But this also reminds me of something else that happened in 1989 and 19 and into the 90s, and that is what happened with the fall of the Berlin Wall and all the countries in Eastern Europe breaking free of the Soviet Union, and then the protest that took place in China. Now, a lot of my classmates are too young to remember this. Most of them were not even born when this happened. I remember it well. There was a huge mass of Chinese students who went to Tiananmen Square to protest not having democracy. They saw their chance and they went there and they stayed there for many days. And many people from around the country were coming and celebrating and like, oh, yes, this is the start of something. And then the Chinese government sent in tanks. And here's a picture of a young man, a student, who is facing down the tanks. And the tanks didn't want to run him over. They knew that there were cameras on them and they didn't want, but he was out there and they would just inch a little bit forward and he would stand his ground until finally he would just back up a little bit and they would inch a little bit forward again. Eventually he left, he backed off. But it was an amazing visual that this young man was willing to face down the tanks in Tiananmen Square. And I also remember a commentary on Saturday Night Live, of all places. Dennis Miller, you may know him. He's often on Fox News. He's actually a very conservative person, but he's a comedian. And he was doing Weekend Update at that time. And he mentioned, in relation to the flag burning, he said, you know, that student who faced down those tanks, he wasn't doing it because the design of Betsy Ross was so fetching. He was doing it because of the Bill of Rights. And a country that loves freedom so much, we even let you burn our flag, is a little bit like a God who loves the world so much, he lets you kill his son. And I was amazed to hear that on Saturday Night Live. And I think he's right. I think he's right. But whether you're taking a knee, a lot of people think being on your knees is actually a sign of respect, not disrespect. Whether you're taking a knee during the Pledge of Allegiance, whether you're burning a flag, it's free speech. And if we allow it, it's because we love free speech and we realize that that's what makes us a great country. Should school leaders address issues of social justice, diversity, gender, political issues of the day? That's really the wrong question because they have no choice. These issues are coming to your school whether you want to address them or not. So the real question is, how are you going to address them? My opinion, the school should not be in the position of giving students political ideologies. We should tell them what the facts are. We should tell them what the different positions are, and we should teach them critical thinking skills. As far as thing that bothers me most about what I learned when I was in high school, I never heard about Black Wall Street. I never heard about the Tulsa, Oklahoma race riots. I never heard about the people in California that had the Black people that had their resort property taken away from them to be turned into a whites only resort. I'd never heard of those things. We need to be teaching that part of our history too. And I think more and more we are. Because whether it's Black history or whether it's any other ethnic group that comes in, it's still American history. It's still my history. It's still history that involves all the people that were living here then and that are living here now. And it affects what we decide and what we're going to do today. So I think we need to be in the position of giving the students all the facts, all the historical facts, all the hard facts, without trying to color it with our opinion. Now, that may be impossible, probably impossible to completely present things that are bias free, but that is what we should be aiming for. That's my opinion.